colleagues from the media, and I probably stand here from maybe not the other side of the table, as they call it, but somewhat in a parallel industry from the media, which is in the business of public relations. People who create information which is then to be disseminated on behalf of corporates, on behalf of government organizations, on behalf of opinion makers, and what have you. So anybody who needs to disseminate information about himself or on an organization or a brand or a product typically would use advertising companies and public relations consultants such as us. So our perspective is working with the media. Our perspective is how to be able to create media-worthy information in a manner that information about these companies, these products, these brands, these people, these non-governmental organizations are able to be disseminated to general publics and masses. But that's one part of the story. When I was given the topic, I was said, managing in the time of uncertainty. And when you are talking in the time of uncertainty, what leaps up to me is really political uncertainty. When the dollar-rupee ratio is swinging like a roller coaster on a daily basis, when Anna Hazare movements are coming in like a storm and petering out like nothing at some point in time, when scams abound, when credibility is an issue, when governments are looking at being toppled at the top of a hat, when ministers have to resign because they tweeted, that is uncertainty to me. And development really is also a victim of uncertainty. So how many infrastructure projects, you've talked about the Gurgaon tollway, right? It's a development project. Uncertain because there is always a controversy about when the toll needs to be collected, how much toll needs to be collected, traffic jam. The DND tollway is a victim to that kind of a problem. Educational scams are an issue. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan runs aground almost every third day. Uncertainty. Managing media during uncertainty is a wrong word. What I would like to talk to you about today is working with the media at a time when everything around us is in a flux. So, where is media also coming from when we are talking about uncertainty? So let's talk about development in the times of uncertainty. And what really draws media attention today, and with Mehraj here and with Vipin here, I'm probably going to be strengthened to sort of present these views to you. Rural poverty and farmer suicides draws media attention. Development issue. Malnourishment. India is probably showing the highest indexes of malnourishment, even higher than some African nations. Right? Corruption in education, crime against women, power and sanitation crises. These are the things that grab eyeballs. And all of us would want to go and crucify the media by saying you are sensationalizing. Point is, who will bring the issues and the problems that surround all these development projects to the fore? Ultimately, if we did not have a fourth estate as active as the way they are, you would probably not have brought a lot of the irregularities to the fore, based on which today young people like yourselves are demanding for accountability. It wouldn't have happened. But it also poses a challenge. It poses a challenge for development companies, poses a challenge for pharma companies, educational protagonists, and even, the government at large. How to be able to communicate information and at what level the demand for scrutiny and the accountability will then derail such communication and such projects. That becomes a question, that becomes a challenge of managing or talking to media at the time of uncertainty. So, projects are under scanner for efficacy. Project affected people have a bigger voice. NGOs play a huge role in shaping public opinion. The Dow Chemicals issue, if you see, every anniversary, there is going to be something or the other that gets written about the Dow Chemical issue, which is like now 28 years old in the whole thing. Where is it headed? Nobody knows. Media today also takes a very national view about it. I and if they are now beyond whose jurisdiction it is and so on and so forth, media understands that it needs to be cleaned up, that site needs to be cleaned up, the other debates can be resolved later. But what has to come are the agitations, what has to come are people who are actually patting their heads and thumping their chests saying we need indemnity and so on and so forth. And then there is the government and its ministries and officials who also speak to the media regularly, and at a point creates an environment where the objective perspective tends to become the first casualty, because there are 20 different views which are coming and 20 different ways in which media plays all this up. And they have to, because they ultimately have to be able to represent all points of views. But the challenge therefore is, in an environment such as this, what is the right view, how do you project it, what do you say, and what then brings in objectivity, not so much from a point of view of the politics of development, but from the side of the science and rationality of development. Are there any takers for it? Probably, I'm not so sure, are there so many, because ultimately, when I talk to a lot of my colleagues on this, they would say, oh, but that's the kind of content an economist would write about. It's probably not the kind of content that would be interesting to, let's say, our Times of India mainline paper, or maybe relegated to one page of development in an Economic Times, and so on and so forth. So, from a content management perspective, working with the media happens to be an issue.